Fried rice is a staple that a lot of us grew up eating, but I don't know about you, but the first couple of times I made a couple of mistakes that just didn't give me the results I wanted. So today I'm gonna give you helpful tips on how to make really good fried rice at home. So egg fried rice seems to be all the rage now because of the BBC and Uncle Roger. I love that guy, by the way.
Your parents never teach you?
So I thought this would be the perfect dish to extrapolate tips from. So the most important thing in this recipe is obviously the rice. Everyone that gives tips on fried rice tells you to use day-old rice. It's one of those things that is just repeated over and over again in a recipe that you just don't think to ever challenge it or ever think where that tip came from in the first place. Now, do I believe that day-old rice is the best? Yes and no. Give me a second, I'll show you. So this, if you're in an Asian household like me, you always have a rice cooker on with some rice. This is day-old rice. Look at it, it's like half the shape of that rice cooker. Now, would this make good fried rice? No, because it's too wet, too clumpy. See how it sticks directly to my hands? So there's a certain way to dry that rice so that it's better used for fried rice. Let's get straight into it. So tip number one is make sure you have your rice selection on pat. I personally like to use medium grain rice. I have a preference for jasmine rice because it has a little bit of flavor already that's nice and fragrant. If I want something that's a bit stickier and more decadent, I will use a sushi rice, but this will be slightly more clumpy, so just understand that. Number two, it is really important to wash your rice. Again, this is one of those things that's repeated to us by our mothers and we don't actually know why. And so we just do it anyways. But washing rice is not necessarily about removing impurities like a lot of people do say. If your rice is coming from a good producer, more often than not, the rice is actually quite clean already. So this is all about more removing the excess starch that's found on the grain. So by running it in some cold water for 30 seconds to 2 minutes, until the water more or less becomes a little clearer, just releases that starchiness. So what does that starchiness actually do? It just makes the rice a bit more dense and a bit heavier, and it won't be like really fluffy and grainy. The texture won't be there. Tip number three, you need to get your ratios right. So obviously you can do the finger method, more on that in a bit. But the ratio I like to use is 1.2 water to 1 of rice. A lot of people swear by 1:1. I do feel sometimes that gives me something a little too dry.
So if you're wondering, that finger method is actually not grossly inaccurate. It's pretty close, but definitely because it's a large kind of like wide surface, maybe just half a centimeter or even 0.2 centimeters will make a massive difference in terms of water volume. But if you're really in a pinch, it does work. Now to actually cook this rice. I don't know about you guys, but I always feel like rice cookers in Asian households are always hidden. They're kind of like dirty secrets.
Now that the rice is cooked, we need to dry it out. So if you really want to do day-old rice, it's really important that you take your rice, spread it out first. Whatever method you're doing, spread out your rice, let that excess surface moisture of each grain kind of dissipate into the air, and only put that in the fridge once it's completely cooled and gone down to room temperature. How to store it properly? You don't want this to be tightly lid, because what's going to happen is more moisture is going to come out at night. So the tighter that is, the less moisture gets to escape and you'll have something mushy. So you want your packaging or whatever, your Tupperware, to be kind of like loose fitting to leave space for the moisture to get out. I find the best amount of time is honestly nothing less than 12 hours. The technique I'm gonna use today is for freshly made same-day rice. So again, same thing, you wanna spread out your rice, let that excess moisture wick off the skin, and then you're gonna point a fan, or you're gonna leave it outside in a very windy, sunny day, and leave that for at least an hour or two to really just make sure that the grains are as dry on the outside as possible. You're not gonna dry out the inside. Now that we're done with all of that, I'm gonna show you how I make my version of an egg fried rice. Now, depending on your idea of what you've tried before, I like my rice to be somewhere between dry and kind of fluffy, but I still like having those clumps and those little clusters of moisture. I think that they're so good and that they're key. I lived in Shanghai in 2004 for about 6 months. I took a job there, and there was a jiaozi and chow fan vendor at the bottom of my apartment, basically making fried rice and dumplings. And the way he did his egg fried rice was really memorable, because he basically deep fried his eggs first before adding that to the rice mixture with like MSG and stuff like that. Mwah, so good. So the reason behind this is the eggs become really light and airy and crunchy, so they don't end up weighing down the fried rice. Like when you're making fried rice, you don't want to add tons of soy sauce and lots of like oyster sauce and hoisin. It just gets too clumpy and dense. You want to keep it quite light and airy. And by doing that with the eggs, it just gives everything a really nice light texture.
Now that your egg is done, let's get our wok red hot. Add in your peanut oil and make sure to heat that up as well. You can now break up the rice out of your wok as much as you can, or like me, you can add that to the wok and then break them out further in there. The hot oil and the heat will help separate everything. Toast this for about 2 minutes. Make a well in the center and fry off whatever aromatics or vegetables you're using. Here I have some garlic and some scallions. Let that cook for a minute and then stir fry it together for another minute. At this point, you can add in your eggs, a pinch of salt, and some soy sauce. Yes, I do think it's important to add some salt to fried rice for the texture and flavor. If you want, you can also add MSG powder.
Put MSG in everything. It'll turn it better.
It really just brings it to a whole nother level. And we're not gonna add too much sauce because we don't want this to be heavy. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Moment of truth, let's give it a try. Simple, but so delicious. I really think that mixture of both having some salt and some soy sauce really makes a huge difference. Could eat bowls of this.